like there's a few things that probably sort of exemplifies well what Sweden is like.
Yeah.
First of all, we have this concept of what we call Jante, which is essentially this idea that you're not special and you shouldn't believe that you're special. You're just like anyone else. And that's the sort of socialist background that we come from.
Yeah.
I think that puts this sort of a little bit of low ego personality in lots of people in Sweden, that you don't necessarily think that you're special. And so you have a lot less of what you would have in New York, where sort of from a, if I meet sort of salespeople out of the US, they're obviously a lot more bombastic than what you would find with a sort of Swedish salesperson. So I think that puts this layer of sort of having a low ego and sort of playing for the team across most things that we do. I think the other thing is that we're sort of coming from pretty socialist background and therefore pretty consensus driven in many decisions that we're doing, which is sort of a good and a bad. But I think what it leads to in company building is pretty flat organizations. And so what that means is that we can keep, so actually when we started building MIMO, we were very proactively sort of hiring people that were relatively experienced in what they were doing, but were not particularly keen on being a manager, but actually just wanted to get shit done. And I think there's this sort of, I don't think it's super different necessarily to what you would have here in London, but I do think that this sort of Jante idea of you not being special, plus the sort of consensus-driven, let's work as a team in decision-making, creates a pretty strong foundation for having a sort of team just run really quickly and in one specific direction.
It's interesting. So I think the whole idea of a flat hierarchy seems really is a great place to aim for. But I think, as you were saying, mate, in terms of culturally socialist country, that phrase of you're not better than anyone else, I think culturally for you guys, it's much easier to actually embody that flat hierarchy.
Indeed.
Right?
Indeed.
Because I think maybe here, we're so used to sort of top-down industrial revolution.
Exactly.
We basically created industrial revolution, which is input versus output. There is a manager, there's lines, bam, 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 bang.
Yes.
It's much harder for us. You can't, culture and history is inextricably intertwined into who you are. So you can't just, as much as the Swede model's lovely, you're not just be able to do that. And then on the other side, the States, Model T, Ford, tech, all that stuff. So it's just, that's what I was really understanding, the sort of the nuance of the cultures.
Yeah.
Now, it makes total sense. In terms of, okay, so with that phrase, which is don't be above your sort of station, don't think you're perfect. Does that quell ambition, or how does someone be ambitious in that culture?
So I think we've sort of come to, I think there's still an overarching, if you look at Sweden as a whole, that sort of culture is still very much there. But I do think in certain pockets, and I think especially within sort of maybe our pocket where we are at, there's a lot more, that's almost like a trend that's moving, that's getting pushed out because of inspiration from other markets like the tech ecosystem in the US, or the sort of financial ecosystem you have here, or sort of high sort of professional sort of organizations in other countries.
Yeah.
So I think if I'm looking at, our team, I wouldn't say that it's full of people with a Jante mindset. I'd rather say that it's sort of an old tradition that I think overarchingly puts this idea of, hey, let's work as a team to push hard towards something together. But I wouldn't say that it's sort of holding ambition back. I think rather that's where role models come in, where I think it's sort of being able to see that across the street, there's this other company that has sort of taken something out of nothing and built like iZettle, that sort of was literally 30 people when I was there, young people running around, not a lot of structure, but then a few years later sold for $2 billion to PayPal. That's pretty inspirational. I think being able to see that nearby is something that I think then sort of turns this culture a little bit on its head.
Espressos is sponsored by supply chain software gurus Unleashed. It talks to your e-com and accounting software. It's helped islands cut admin time in half, get granular clarity on your margins, know where your stock is, don't miss availability. Brands like Candy Kittens, Tiny Rebel and Trip all use Unleashed, and so should you.